This is an amazing day. I am super stoked today because it is live stream Wednesday. And we're talking about commercial real estate. We're talking about business brokerage. And today it's business brokerage secrets for commercial realtors. We have our special guest today, Tawnya Gilreath. And Tawnya is a good friend of mine. We worked together at eXp Commercial when I was at eXp Commercial and doing business brokerage. In fact, she was my mentor. And so she's like one of my favorite people in the entire world. And I'm really excited to have her today as our guest here with the Realtors Commercial Alliance. Tawnya, welcome aboard.
Hey, thank you, Chris. Happy to be here. Happy to be here talking to commercial real estate agents and hopefully helping to give them a few nuggets that they can take away. A little bit of education is always good for all of us.
Oh, I think a lot of education is great for all of us. And we probably have some residential agents lurking too. And so I'm really excited because residential agents are some of my favorites, and we need great relationships with our residential community, and they need to understand what we're doing and how we do it so that we can be great partners.
Oh, absolutely. I always say that when you look at the world of real estate, look at it and think of it in terms of a three-legged stool. Because you've
Yeah,
got residential real estate, you've got commercial real estate, you've got business brokerage, and that stool falls flat or ends up on the ground if you don't have strong partners in all three sides. So definitely good.
absolutely. I totally agree with you. So, Tanya, I'd like you to just give a little introduction to yourself so that everyone can know who you are and what makes you tick before we get into some questions that I have lined up for you today, okay?
All right, sounds good. So I have been selling businesses since 2006, going on almost 20 years now. And I love selling businesses. It is something that I'm very passionate about. I am very involved with business broker associations. I'm a past president of the California Association of Business Brokers. I'm the education chair of M&A Source and the chair elect for 2027 of M&A Source. And so, business sales, it's fun, it's dynamic. Every business transaction is different, and it's just a really fascinating industry, which for people who have a short attention span or love to learn, there is no shortage of things that you will learn in transacting businesses.
Oh, and one of the things I love about business brokerage is it's different and unique and new challenges every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And selling, how you sell a manufacturing company is different than how you sell an accounting practice, which is, potentially different than how you sell a supermarket, right? They all have certain things in common. They're all businesses, but the approach and the different buyers that you're going to find and the interest of the buyers, the skill set of the buyers, those are all variables that have to be considered when you're looking at selling businesses.
well, not only that, but everyone talks to me and they're like, "Oh, Chris, I really envy you guys that are in commercial because there's no emotion." And I find that, yes, anytime you're dealing with big dollars, people are emotional about their money, but there seems to be a lot of emotion about business brokerage too. So I'm excited to talk about that. But let's start. I think kind of one of the cornerstones that is different between business brokerage and real estate in general, commercial or residential, is the whole idea of confidentiality.
Oh, absolutely. The majority of business sales are confidential. Now, you have the one-offs. Every once in a while, you will have a seller that says, "Oh yeah, my staff already knows," or "Hey, my family are my only employees or my family, and so they know that I'm going to be selling the business." If you're talking about small businesses,
Right.
but in general, business sales are confidential. And so we have to be, usually the employees don't know the business is for sale. We don't want vendors and suppliers to know the business is for sale. I mean, there are a lot of things that can happen, and most of which would be detrimental to the business. And, we don't want customers knowing the business is for sale. We don't want competitors knowing the business is for sale. I mean, think about a competitor who can go to a list of your customers potentially and just say, hey, well, they're selling the business, so you should come give me a shot. Come and work with me. They're selling.
Yeah. So I'm sure that in 20 years of business brokerage, that you've got a great story or two that you can tell about how confidentiality just wreaked havoc in people's lives. Do you mind
Oh,
sharing
yes,
something with, change the
sure.
names to protect the innocent or
Of
guilty?
course. Of course. Yeah, and I can tell you stories that were not necessarily mine, but other
Yeah.
brokers as well, from their experiences. But I do recall story. It was actually a small hair salon in Nevada, and a Century 21 agent went in and started waving a business card saying, "Hey, Century 21, I'm here to sell, or I'm here to show your business." Well, the problem with that is all of the stylists then learned that the business was for sale and decided to leave and go elsewhere. And
Yeah.
so the business overnight, or not overnight, but within the span of about a week, all of the stylists were gone. And so the business no longer had any value, was not saleable.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
But things like that can happen. I mean, you got key employees that can leave. You got your vendors that can leave. You've got customers that'll leave. There's a
Yes.
lot of things that can go wrong if confidentiality is broken. So let's take a quick pause from this conversation. And I want to share with you a little bit about the Realtors Commercial Alliance of California. And our mission statement goes right hand in hand with what Tawnya was saying earlier about the three-legged stool. As the only commercial association of realtors in California, we empower members to thrive in commercial real estate through education, networking, and fostering collaboration among commercial residential real estate professionals and business brokers. Right there is part of our mission statement is your three-legged stool, Tanya.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we were really intentional when we crafted that because we knew that business brokerage is an important part. And we'd like to emphasize our membership benefits. We have monthly commercial real estate education and training. We have monthly commercial real estate project pitch and professional networking Zoom, where people can share their commercial real estate haves, wants, and connect with peers. We're planning to do some social events later this year, and we have a member hotline. There is our hotline. It's actually a voice over IP number, Google Voice. That is for our people to, reach out to us and connect with us. So because we're a small organization, that goes to voicemail, but we do prefer text messages. And I typically, as the CEO of the organization, look at those every evening after work. And we have some upcoming events. Today, of course, we are doing our Business Brokerage Secrets for Commercial Realtors. Next Wednesday, we're celebrating Tax Day by having our commercial real estate property pitch and professional networking Zoom. And I'm a little bit, what do you want to say, jittery today because today is exciting for me because just this morning I had a $10 million commercial real estate listing go live. And I've already been getting some phone calls on that. So I'm excited. That's one of the properties we'll be sharing. People bring their properties. And if you're a commercial real estate agent, you've got some commercial real estate properties that you'd like to share, then we'd love to have you join us. And coming up next month on our live stream is how to list and sell triple net real estate, which is really exciting with Joel Carlson. Joel Carlson's the past president of our organization, and he's a consummate pro educator, and you're going to love what he has to say. And then we have our May property pitch and networking Zoom, and I just booked this morning, Tanya, is unlocking service station sales secrets. How's that for a lot of S's in there, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
we're doing that with Steve Haddadin, who's a CCIM, the owner of an AMPM, and his family owns some additional AMPMs, and Kelly Cheney, who Tanya and I are good friends with. So we're excited to have that coming up in June 3rd. And of course, we want to take a moment to acknowledge our sponsor, deferredtaxdebt.com. So if you have questions about taxes, this is a great place to go take a look and see some of their multitude of strategies for helping people solve their tax issues and challenges in real estate and business brokerage transactions. Fun stuff. All right, so we were just talking about the whole thing of confidentiality. And one of the big things that people have to be hold in very strict confidence is financial information. And financial information, I think, is a lot more important in a business transaction, but things are messy sometimes. You know, talk about the messiness of financials compared to like a straight real estate transaction, Tawnya.
Okay. Well, I mean, when you think about it, let's take an apartment building. If you have an apartment building and you're selling that apartment building, you have a rent roll. You know what the rent is, you know what the income is. It's pretty straightforward. You know what your operating expenses are. You have your utility bills. You might have a laundry room or something, and you're going to have certain maintenance um, about the property, but you can identify pretty much what the realistic expenses are going to be. And so you can pretty easily determine your net operating income. In a business, it's a little different because business owners are creative. And oftentimes you will
Creative.
have, yes, they are very creative at tax mitigation, which is a small business owner, one of their major goals in life is to pay as little taxes as possible. And so, the tax mitigation strategies that people employ are very creative. And what you will find in some of the financials is that, you'll find their kids' college tuition, the boat slip, the repairs to the beach house. I mean, all kinds of things that really, yes, they expense them through the business, but no, they really are not expenses that are required for the successful operation of the business.
So
So
I
one of
used
the
to have a
jobs,
tax practice, and we used to
mm,
say, do you know what the difference is between tax avoidance and tax evasion? It's
tell
5
me.
to 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyhow, yeah, I mean, there's one thing of working in those gray areas where it's like, okay, is this really a legitimately deductible business expense or is it not? And so let's dive into that a little bit. I think one of the classic things that you taught us about when you were mentoring me and our group was the whole thing with cash and how cash is fluid and tends to disappear between the cracks.
Mm. Yeah, there are a lot of small business owners that don't declare cash, and that can be a problem. Uh, I mean, it's a big problem because ultimately, when they go to sell their business, they want top dollar. And so oftentimes what they'll do is, they'll try and convince the business broker that, hey, I have an extra 20,000 a month going home in my back pocket. Well, that all sounds good, but what you have to do is continue asking them questions. And what they want you to do is add that to the top line revenue on the tax returns. So that's an extra $240,000 that they're saying they have in cash or in profit, which makes a big difference in the business value. But as you continue talking to them about how they pay certain expenses, what you find is that they'll say, oh, yeah. And, my employees, I give them bonuses in cash. And some of my vendors, I pay them cash because if I pay them cash, then they don't charge me sales tax. And all of a sudden you see, or you hear because you're listening, you hear them talk about this cash going out and out and out. So the 20 grand that they said went home in their back pocket, you have absolutely no way of proving that ever because it hasn't been declared anywhere. And in fact, as they continue talking, they're telling you that all this cash is actually going out for all kinds of other things as well.
Yeah. So when you have a business that has been operating a little bit loose, let's say with the IRS, and they want to sell, can you reform them and prepare them to get a good price legitimately for their business? Or how do you go about that process and how long does it take?
Generally, they need to have reasonable financials that are showing a profit for the last 3 years.
Hmm.
Uh, you can get away with less than that, depending on the lender, and also depending on how much revenue they actually are declaring on their tax returns. So if it's a small business and they're declaring a loss every year and they're upside down every year, then they need 2 to 3 years of positive tax returns in order to really be able to sell that business for a value that is going to be acceptable to them. You can sell the business otherwise, it's just not going to get the value that they want. It's going to be more, if a business is showing negative tax returns, you can add back certain things. If they're paying themselves, you have officers' compensation, if they're an S corporation or whatever. So you can still find a few things to add back, but when you're starting from a hole, you know, it's challenging just to get them up to even ground so that you can apply any type of a multiple to what we refer to as seller's discretionary earnings. So it just becomes very challenging to find value in that business.
Yeah. So when looking at financials, I mean, there's got to be some red flags that you see. So describe for us some of the red flags that you see that maybe a realtor wouldn't see.
Well, first off, generally when we're doing any type of an analysis or a recast, we require both the business tax returns as well as the P&Ls and balance sheets. And so a lender, if you're trying to get any type of an SBA loan, the lender is always going to want, they're always going to require the last 3 years of business tax returns. So by getting those up front, we can see right away what is the top line revenue they declared on their tax returns, and then we can compare that to the profit and loss statement and see if there's a big difference. So I'll give you an example. I had a construction company that came to me, wanted to sell. Gentleman was building spec homes, and he sent me his P&Ls and said his tax preparer was in the process of doing his tax returns. He would get it to me as soon as he had it. And he hadn't filed taxes in the last couple of years. So the only thing he gave me was the P&Ls and balance sheets. So I went through, I did my recast off of those, and it looked like he was generating about $350,000 in profit. Well, that was all good. I mean, that gives you, good value to the business. But then about 3-4 weeks later, he sent me the tax returns. Now on his P&L, his top line revenue was slightly over $1 million. On his tax returns that he sent me, the top line revenue was only $650,000.
That's a little bit of a difference.
Well, there's your 350 right there. So he went from having a $350,000 profit, which gave us basically a $1 million valuation on his business, to at this point he was breaking even.
Yeah.
And there was nothing we can do because we can't add back. We have to go, lenders are going to go off of the tax returns. You can't manipulate top line revenue. So if the top line revenue is only 650, that's what you're stuck with, and all the expenses come out and there's nothing left. So there was no way to sell the business.
Wow. So that probably brings a lot of emotion into the equation. And I find that, there is a lot of emotion with business brokerage. And why do you see so much emotion, do you think?
Well, I can tell you, Chris, that for a lot of these business owners, that business is something they built over the last 30 or 40 years, particularly baby boomers. So I saw a statistic said that 40% of all the small businesses in the United States are owned by baby boomers right now. And when you think about it, your baby boomers are on the low end are 62 years old now, and on the high end are 82. So that's your range. They own 40% of the businesses in this country. So it's why everybody's excited about what they refer to as the silver tsunami, right? All these businesses that need to change hands. But you're talking about somebody who's, on the low end, 62 years old, that's built that business over the last 30 or 40 years. That business, their identity is wrapped up in it. That business is like one of their children, Their kids typically have their own careers or even their own businesses, and so don't want the family business necessarily. And so it is a very personal thing. And for many business owners, it's about legacy and it's about community. And yes, it's also about money. You know, they want to capitalize on their effort for all those years, but really it's kind of the non-monetary, um, the the responsibility they have to their employees that have been with them for 20 or 30 years, and those employees, their families and all of that. So there's a lot of things that are very emotional to those business owners. And they want to make sure that they find the right buyer that can continue.
Yeah. Now, I find that when I was dealing with business brokerage, the emotions were a huge, huge part of it, just because of what you were saying. People are so invested in their business because they've grown that business from a thought in their
Mm-hmm.
mind to something tangible to now they're looking at it as a retirement nest egg.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so have you seen, I'm sure you've seen, give me an example of maybe how a business owner's emotions impacted on the whole negotiation and sale of the business.
Ah, you know, that is interesting. I have seen transactions where a buyer came in with an offer. Part of their negotiation strategy was to submit a low offer in the hopes that they could get the seller to reduce things. Um, but the sellers take things very personally. And I've had sellers, you know, where a buyer has submitted what they consider to be lowball offer, and the seller basically has said, I'm not going to counter, reject it flat out, and tell that person to go away because I will not consider any additional offers from them at all. So it's just like
I,
it's like a personal assault. Some of them take it as a personal assault.
yeah, I had a apartment house owner that I was dealing with a few years ago. I had a little listing. It was a quarter of $1 billion, but it was
Mm.
16 different properties.
Wow.
And this guy, he was from Cuba. And so he was passionate about his real estate. And someone came in with a lowball offers, and he had exactly the same reaction. It's like, those, I'm not even going to deal with them. Just tell them to go to beep, beep, beep.
Exactly.
So it is kind of funny how emotion plays into that. So I think
Yeah.
another big difference between business brokerage and, your realtor practices, in selling real estate is the involvement of the seller after the sale. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, you know, when you're selling real estate, buyer and seller never actually have to meet.
Yeah.
And they can, right? Maybe an inspection is done or something like that. Seller happens to be there. But oftentimes they have no reason to ever meet each other. In business, it's very different. In business, not only do they meet each other, they're going to meet each other before there's ever an offer made or an LOI. They're going to be talking, they're going to be working together as part of the due diligence, have multiple conversations there. And then, like you said, after closing, there's always a trend. I can't say always. There, there's typically a transaction period that's going to last anywhere from 30 days to 90 days or longer, depending on the type of business that it is. And so, if you think about, let's say, a professional service business, let's say you sell um, maybe a law practice, an estate planning practice, or a financial
Medical
advisor.
practice.
Medical
Yeah,
practice, you've got all kinds of issues. But
yeah,
in a law practice or a financial advisory practice or even a medical practice, oftentimes you you have it. And medical, I would say more like chiropractic or something where they're seeing patients a little more frequently. But typically you're going to have a handoff. You're going to have the seller hold meetings sometimes with the clients or be present, continue to be present at the business to make introductions, to introduce the new buyer, to hand over and transfer those relationships. Because ultimately, in a professional service business like that, you know, that's what's generating the revenues, the client base. And so if they go elsewhere, then you lose all the value in the business. So the buyer wants to make sure that their retention is very high. Accounting practices, tax practices, property management companies, any type of professional service, typically looking at retention. Insurance books of business, same thing. You want that retention because without it, the value of the business declines very, very rapidly.
Yeah. So while we're talking about seller involvement, I think disclosures are really important too, and how the sellers approach disclosures and what buyers are looking for in disclosures. And there's the whole aspect of liability and how some of those disclosures can spill over onto the practitioner and cause legal issues for them. That's a huge ball of wax. Can you kind of unbundle that a little bit for us?
Yeah, there is, there's a principle that we live by as business brokers, and that is go ugly early.
Go ugly early.
Go ugly early. So what that means is disclose, disclose, disclose. So from your confidential information memorandum, which you are going to provide to a prospective buyer after they've signed a confidentiality agreement, anything you're aware of in the business that might be problematic, put that in the SIM. The reason is if you're going to scare off a buyer, you want to scare them off right from the beginning. You don't want to get 3 months, 4 months down the road through hours and hours of due diligence and all that just to have a buyer learn something that should have been brought to their attention up front. So just go ugly early. It's going to get rid of all the buyers who are going to be scared off and leave you with people that say, okay, I understand that could be a problem. How are we going to address it?
Yeah. One of the things that I've incorporated in my commercial real estate practice is that whole concept too. Because I would rather cut strings with people or, cut relationships off early than wasting, hours or days or weeks or even months of time with people, only to find out that we could have terminated this. I could have spent my time working on a different project, a long time ago. Just last night, I was talking to a residential realtor who I'm mentoring on commercial real estate, and he brought someone, prospect that we're having a Zoom with later this week. And I said, okay, I want you to do some research on, the prospects. And they want to lease a large space. And, what do you need to know? And I always try to figure this out a little bit on their own instead of just giving them a silver spoon, right?
Mm.
And so I'm like, so I want you to go out, do some research, and figure out, is this really a good prospect for us? And what are the things that you're going to look at to see? And then they came back and they had done a little bit of research. And I'm like, okay, so this company that these people have, what do you know about this company? And are they going to be in a position to lease 12,000 square feet of Class A industrial space in Orange County? I mean, what leads you to believe that they're qualified to do that? And that left some questions in his mind. So he's like, okay, I got to go back and do some more research. And then, of course, was the question of, okay, Chris, when we get on this Zoom call, how are you going to draw that information out of people? So that's one of the interesting things that's, I think, really different between your traditional real estate agent and a business broker, or my background of being a certified financial planner and a tax practitioner, is how do you draw the information out of people that they're not necessarily walking into the meeting thinking they're going to disclose?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes back to just listening. Listen to what they say, ask deeper questions, ask them to tell you more, because ultimately they will tell you what you need to know. But it does sometimes take asking the same question, especially with business owners. I mean, they can be cagey, quite honestly. Some of them can be cagey, and you can ask them a specific question and they're going to dance. And you have to keep drawing them back in to the point, the question, until you get an answer that's going to be satisfactory. A lot of times when they're dancing around the financials. So we try and tackle that one up front. But yeah, I remember selling a recycling company, and the real estate that it was on, and the real estate was contaminated. And we knew that. We had a phase one, we did a limited phase two. We knew it was contaminated. We put it in the SIM. It's like, there's the buyer is either going to need to do a full phase two, or they're going to want to do something to figure out what potential liability there may be. But we ended up getting it sold. So it just goes, there's no problem that's insurmountable, but it has to be addressed up front, and it has to be disclosed up front, because otherwise, like you said, you're just wasting time with buyers that may not ever buy.
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to say to the prospect, I'm saying my job as your agent is to sell you, not just to sell, I mean, especially when you're looking to lease, it's like my job is to sell you to the landlord. And the landlord's going to ask a lot of questions. And so I'm just going to come out and I'm going to ask you the nitty gritty, pointed questions and see how you respond and what kind of questions you can expect going through that process. And I'm sure the same thing is true with you when you're dealing with business owners. It's like, we know that the potential buyer is going to ask these questions. So let's prepare the answers up front.
We want to know what the answers are. I don't necessarily tell them to prepare answers or prepare response. I want them to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I said, there is no business that exists that doesn't have warts. Right? All businesses have warts. So I don't want a business owner to try and prepare responses and all of that are going to be covert or inadvertently hide information that a buyer should have. And so, I will give them, one of the things we do in my practice is we will do video interviews with the seller, and we'll give them a topic list, and we'll go through, we'll record it and all that. But I don't want them to rehearse. I don't want them to use, they can use some notes if they want to, but I prefer honesty and just authenticity. Just be real, because ultimately a buyer is going to find out. Like I said, in real estate, buyer and seller almost never meet. In business, they're going to meet multiple times. It's kind of like dating. If you portray yourself to be something up front, and that's not who or what you really are, your true colors come out at some point. So let's just put those true colors out there up front, because otherwise you are either going to have a deal that goes for months and months and never closes, or even worse, it does get closed and then it ends up in a courtroom.
Speaking of courtrooms, so as I recall, you actually went to law school because of things that came up as a business broker, and now you're passionate about working the legal side of business brokerage along with the business side of being a business broker. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So that was early on in my career. It's probably 2009. I had a transaction. It was a manufacturing company, about $3.5 million deal. We were 2 weeks before closing. It was a stock purchase agreement. Seller hired an attorney to review the escrow instructions of all things. And his attorney decided to write a 5-page amendment to the stock purchase agreement that had already been signed by both parties and completely rewrite the deal. And so it was infuriating. We ended up having a meeting at the attorney's office with seller, the two buyers, myself, and the attorney. The buyers got so angry, they literally got up and walked out. And this was probably August, I think, of 2009. So I was able to get the transaction closed, brought it back, resurrected it. Phoenix rises from the ashes, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, wasn't the saying with business brokerage is that you have to resurrect your transaction at least three times between beginning and closing?
yeah, every deal dies at least 3 times.
Yeah.
That's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got it closed December 31st of 2009. And I
Wow.
started law school in January of 2010. And the reason I did that was because the attorney, in order to get the deal done and closed, the attorney, of course, came back to me and came back to my representation agreement and wanted to renegotiate that. And I ended up having to carry a note for my portion of my fee that was in connection with a seller note that the seller had agreed to carry. He, cut out my fee on the lease of the building and on some other things. And at the point, he would call me up, we would have a conversation, we would agree on the phone, and then he would write things up completely different and send it over to me. And I knew what I was reading is not what we had said and what we had agreed to, but I didn't have enough knowledge and legal background to be able to redline it and send it back to him. And
Mm,
so at that point, it was like, okay, I'm going to get this deal done and then I'm going to educate myself. So I did. And
yeah.
I went to an online law school, never stepped foot in a classroom. It was 2010, it was 4 years, 2010 to 2014. Took the California State Bar in 2015, and I've been a practicing attorney since then. So,
Okay. And just as a side note, discuss how practicing law and business brokerage, how they intertwine and how you have to keep those practices separate from each other. Because I think a lot of people really don't understand that when you're representing someone as a business broker, you can't really be their attorney at the same time, right?
correct. Yeah, California State Bar is very specific about, you cannot practice law except from a law practice. So I do have 2 separate email addresses, one for law, one for business brokerage. I have 2 phone numbers. I have, everything, 2 addresses. I have 2 different office addresses for business brokerage versus law practice, and things are very separate. That being said, I do have clients where I sold them a business in the past. Now they need an estate plan. And so I am their attorney for their estate plan, but has nothing to do with their business sale or business acquisition. I can't be both at the same time, but I can do one or the other. And if I'm hired as their broker, I can have great conversations with their attorney and save them a lot of money.
Yeah. No, that's good. So the whole thing with the timing and sequence of a transaction is really different with business brokerage than it is with real estate, right?
I would say, the average business sale, last time I saw, takes 8 to 10 months. Most business brokers are going to take an engagement or a listing for a year, um, because it takes 8 to 10 months to sell. I think that it really depends on the preparation and how prepared, the business is, how well it's packaged before it goes to market, but also the sellers, how, because once you get into due diligence, you get a due diligence request list from a buyer that could be anywhere from 3 pages to 17 pages of documents that they want to see. And so if some of that has been prepared in the data room up front, then you are far ahead of the game. If none of it has been prepared and the only thing you have is the financials, well, then the seller is really scrambling, trying to gather up all these documents and things to make available to a buyer. And it can be very time consuming, and your due diligence period can go for, 30 days, 45, 60 days, depending on the transaction.
When the size of the transaction will matter quite a bit with that too. I mean, if you're dealing with a small restaurant versus a large manufacturing concern.
Yes. Yes. And then also the sophistication of the buyer. So if you have a first-time buyer who is coming in to buy like a small restaurant, they're not going to have a 17-page due diligence list. They'll be lucky to have any kind of due diligence list at all. And oftentimes they're going to be asking you as the broker, well, what should I request? You're like, well, I can give you some basic things that are typical of what clients request, but really you should be reaching out to your attorney and your CPA to help you with due diligence. But the reality is that businesses under $500,000 or so, it's very rare that a buyer will engage a CPA or an attorney for any assistance. So, but
Yeah, that's really true
manufacturing,
with real estate too.
yeah. So manufacturing, if you have a private equity firm that's coming in and buying something, then yeah, they're going to have a 17-page due diligence list. And they're going to look under every rock and drive you crazy. Drive the seller crazy, I should say.
Yeah, I'm doing a real estate transaction right now in Florida, working with an agent in Florida. I'm not licensed in Florida, so I'm not actually doing it, but I'm helping them. And it's with a PE firm, so
Yeah.
they're fun to deal with.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Yeah. So financing a business versus financing real estate. How is that different and how's it the same?
Well, it's the same in that, you can get SBA loans. For real estate, you might be looking at a 504 for an owner user building. For a business, you're typically looking at an SBA, a 7A loan. Rates are a little bit higher on the 7As. What you are financing is not, I mean, in real estate, everybody knows what you're financing. The real estate's tangible. It's there. You can see it, you can touch it, you can, you can do inspections and all that.
The real
A
estate's not going to
business,
walk away.
yeah, the real estate is not going to walk away. Exactly. In business, what you're really, you are financing the cash flow, the operations, the employees, the reputation, the goodwill. It's intangible. And employees can walk away and cash flow can disappear. And so it's a very different animal that you're financing. And thank goodness that there's an SBA out there, because a lot of commercial banks, a lot of conventional loans would not, they won't finance just straight business sales, where they will on obviously on real estate.
Yeah. So you've got so many moving point parts here. You've got the confidentiality, you've got the disclosures, you've got the employees, you've got a lot of ways that a deal can fall apart.
True.
So it's like, what percentage of transactions that you start actually get to closing?
Depends. That depends. I mean, quite honestly, it depends. So life happens. I had a transaction where we found the perfect buyers for it. Buyers, the bank loved the buyers, so we had all the financing in order and all of that. And we went to the landlord. The landlord requested all kinds of information from the buyers, loved the buyers. That was all good, but SBA requires it's a 10-year loan. They want a 10-year lease. There was only 2.5 years left on the lease. And the landlord decided they didn't want to extend the lease. So your deal evaporates. I mean, you can't, there's no way to get an SBA loan with a 2.5-year lease. Just doesn't happen. So there are things that can happen that can kill the deal. They're way outside of your span of control. Everybody's acting in good faith. Everybody's on the same page, moving together. Buyer and seller are all happy, thinking they're going to get this done. Broker's happy. And then, it's a hand grenade when you've got a landlord that just says, nope, we're not going to do it. And there is not a thing you can do about it as a broker. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
But
Now you do a
also,
lot of manufacturing too, right? Go ahead and finish that thought.
well, I was going to say one of the biggest deal killers, to be honest with you, in small businesses is when you have a business owner that they'll list the business with you, you're out there marketing and all of that, and they mentally check out. And now you find the perfect buyer and all that, but then they go look at the current financials and the business is declining because the seller took their eye off the ball. The seller,
They got short-termers disease, thinking about retirement
yeah, early retirement, right? So they
instead of
retired
keeping the foot
early.
on the accelerator until someone else can put their foot on the accelerator.
Exactly, exactly. So that is literally one of the biggest deal killers that I see is because the seller at that point doesn't want to reduce the price, and the buyer says, "Well, you haven't maintained the numbers, and your business is not today as we're 2 weeks away from closing or whatever. Your business is not worth what it was when I initially looked at it based on the numbers that you were representing back then, and you're
Yeah,
not doing what you did last year numbers wise." So that can be a big challenge.
that can be a huge challenge. So let's back up just a little bit
Yeah.
because you were talking about lease structuring and stuff and how it impacts on the sellability of a business.
Mm.
So the prospect that I was talking about a little bit ago for the manufacturing company in Southern California,
Mm.
they're looking to lease some space. And, one of the conversations that we need to have with them is, hey, look, if you're preparing to sell this business in 3 years, then that really impacts on the type of lease you want to get. So, what kind of advice do you give to someone who's getting into a lease and they're planning their retirement in, say, 3 to 5 years for a manufacturing company like that?
I would say for manufacturing, I mean, they want to have a 5-year lease with a 5-year option at least,
Hmm.
because and depending on the size of the manufacturing company, it can be hugely expensive to relocate. They
Right.
have power requirements, all kinds of things. Sometimes the floors have to be reinforced for the heavy equipment that they have, the machinery. So, there are all kinds of things that may need to be done. So that makes it really expensive. So if they can get a longer term lease, the longer the term, the better, especially if they know that they're going to be selling in the next 3 to 5 years. If they already have a 10-year lease with another 10-year option, that puts them in a great position because SBA, as long as the business is profitable, then the lease is already pretty much in place. It has to be assigned, but other than that, most leases are assignable, with landlord approval, of course. But so yeah, they just need to be cognizant of that, because if they do like a 2 or 3 year lease and have no options, or have only a 2 or 3 year option, then we're going to have to go back and try and get longer term in order to satisfy the SBA, so that they can sell the business.
And so the SBA is going to be looking for a minimum of what for
Ten,
remaining lease term?
10 years is what they want, because that is the duration of the loan. Now, that being said, I have been able to get loans on businesses where we had 7 years in place. Um, but it depends on the type of business. So if it's a distribution business and you're talking about a warehouse, it's not that hard to find another warehouse and relocate everything into it. And so then what they do is they say, okay, the lender will just say, okay, you don't have the 10 years that we need. So what I want you to do is have the buyer put together, basically a letter that explains what their plan is for relocating the business at the end of that term, at the end of the lease term, whether it's 7 years. It's like, okay, we expect that we're going to be down for a week. We're going to relocate everything into a new facility in the same area, general area, or whatever. So it depends on the type of business, quite honestly.
So how often do you see the landlord being willing to release the seller from financial liability for that lease?
Almost never. Almost never. But I can tell you, I did have a client years ago, and he had a business. We sold a package of, it's like 3 cell phone stores that he owned. One of them was in a Westfield mall. And so the seller decided he wanted to be released, from the personal guarantee. He had another 3 years, I think, on the lease. He wanted to be released from the personal guarantee. So he went to Westfield, and Westfield said, yeah, we'll release that. We just want $50,000 in key money to do it.
Mm, yeah. No, as a landlord, I never want to give up a security interest, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I've it has been done. I've seen it done a couple of times. It's usually very expensive.
Yeah. So when you've got a manufacturing plant, they need 10 years left on the lease. How do you protect your seller, or what do you advise them to do to protect themselves?
Well, that's a great question because if they have a long lease like that, I mean, I think that's usually why I recommend that they have like a five-year lease with, multiple 5-year options or something, because that will shorten the term where they're still responsible. Usually they're only responsible to through as far as their personal guarantee only goes to the end of the term and their
Hmm.
initial term, but once somebody exercises an option to extend, they're off of the hook typically. um, but another thing we can do is go back is we can go in and we can just negotiate with the landlord to try and get them released, get their personal guarantee released.
So have you ever worked with a company that was getting ready to lease property with the intent to sell, and they maybe work some language into the initial lease contract?
I have not done that. I've not worked directly on the lease negotiations that way. I have had clients who their attorney has written language into the lease accordingly. I've not
Hmm.
written language into a lease like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So a lot to think about, right?
There is a lot to think about. I mean, the reality is that selling a business is just it's a very different process than selling real estate. And so I would say if you're interested in it, it's really a lot of fun. It's really it's interesting. There's never a dull moment. Every business is different, but you really have to enjoy learning and you have to enjoy doing your homework, because otherwise you're doing the seller a disservice.
So for the agents who are listening to this that are residential or commercial agents,
Yeah.
and they're like, man, I would love to sell businesses. What should they be looking at as they're exploring the idea of selling business opportunities? And should they, I've seen a lot of people, they're like, well, I'm just going to go list a small business and get some experience. What do you say?
I would say it's probably not the best way to do it. So go out to ibba.org. And IBBA has, if you look at, I forget the
So that's
exact
the
section.
International Business Brokers Association, right?
Exactly, exactly. But IBBA has, they've got a whole series on what it takes to be a business broker, specifically to help educate people to say, hey, is this something that I would enjoy? And I would say go learn through the IBBA. It's a video series. You listen to some of their podcasts, um, but try and do a little bit of that upfront education. I can tell you that I've had people come to me before and say, I want to get out of residential. Everything is just so emotional there. And I want to sell businesses because I can't deal with emotions of people.
And
And I
so do
tell
you
them, no,
like
no, no.
fall over laughing or what?
Exactly. I was like, okay, well, maybe you need to go to commercial then because commercial is more about the numbers. You're not going to deal with a ton of emotion there, although I'm sure that there can be. But it was like business, there is so much emotion in business with a lot of the business owners and the buyers for that matter. So
At least
I
you're
was like,
not
yeah,
dealing with teenage daughters, though.
yeah. But you might
Yeah.
be dealing with 20 something, you know, grandchildren that thought that grandpa was going to give them the business.
Oh, yeah.
And that can create problems as well.
That's true. That's true. Okay. So, how should someone dip their toe in? Once they've gone to ibba.org and they've seen, okay, so here's what it is to be a business broker. you know, should they start by becoming a great referral agent and understanding how to be a great referral agent, or what do you think?
Well, I would say if they really want to become a business broker, they really want experience transacting businesses, partner with somebody, partner with a business broker. Because if you're just referring something, yeah, you can refer it, but you're not going to get the experience of actually going through the process. Once you refer something off, a lot of times the referral agreements say that you're hands off from then on. So I would say find somebody that you can partner with and do a deal, be involved, be on the calls with the buyers and sellers, participate in helping to prepare the marketing packages, understand what goes into creating a data room and help with getting documentations and things into the data room to prepare that for due diligence. I mean, there's a lot of steps involved in selling a business, and certainly it's a workload that can be divided up and shared and walk through with people. So if you really want to learn about it, there's no better way than doing it, but do it with somebody who's competent already that can help you to make sure you don't burn a seller. Because you got to remember, Chris, it's a responsibility. And like we talked about the silver tsunami, you've got somebody who built a business over 30 or 40 years. Once they sell it, it's gone. Cuts off their stream of income. You know, if you didn't know what you were doing and did the job wrong, you could potentially have cost them substantial amounts of money. And what happens is that's what lands you in a courtroom. And nobody needs that. Seller doesn't need that. Brokers don't need that. So just partner with somebody and do it right.
So a lot of real estate agents, especially residential agents, less so on the commercial side, they have a transaction coordinator. And do you have a transaction coordinator, or do you do all that administrative work yourself?
I don't have a transaction coordinator. I don't necessarily do all of it myself either. So
Okay.
I do work with other people. I partner with other people and we share workload. Uh, I will do some of it. They will do some of it. We divide things up. I also have two virtual assistants and they will help with some of the workload as well. So I tend to work in a team. It's There's a lot to do in selling a business. And so if you're trying to wear all the hats yourself, it can become very complicated very quickly and things fall through the cracks.
Well, and the other thing is if you don't know what you're doing, you're not doing yourself a service, and you're certainly doing your client a disservice too.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think even more importantly is you're really opening yourself up to a litigious environment that you really don't want to get embroiled in.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
when you compare the litigiousness of business brokerage versus real estate, how would you rate that?
I would say that, business sales, the smaller the business, the higher the liability. Or the smaller the business, the higher the probability it'll land in court. Because if you're selling a $2 million business or a $20 million business, buyer and seller both have attorneys and CPAs that are helping them, that are reviewing documents, that are, helping the buyer with due diligence and so forth, reviewing financials. If you're dealing with a $200,000 business, you're typically dealing with a first-time buyer, oftentimes who's investing their entire life savings, who refuses to hire an attorney, who refuses to hire a CPA, and has never been a business owner before. And so we know that, business, running a business, I mean, startups, there's a very high percentage of startups that fail. Buying an existing business that has been profitable, if you make major changes all at one time and don't know really what you're doing, have no business ownership experience and all that, it potentially can decline as well. And so what happens with these smaller businesses is If things don't work out the way the buyer wants them to, and the business gets burned to the ground, then the buyer starts looking for somebody to blame. And they're going to blame the seller and the broker. And it's going to be, you didn't tell me, you failed to disclose. They're going to hire an attorney. The attorney is going to cast the broad net, everybody who touched the business, which is basically seller and broker. And so, yeah, I would say it's, from a litigation standpoint, I would say small businesses, you have a much higher probability of being sued.
Well, a lot of people don't think about it, but if you carry back paper on a piece of real estate, you can go repossess it and maybe they can do some damage to the property. But like you said, someone can burn a business to the ground pretty rapidly and reduce the value to zero.
Yes.
So having that UCC filing or that note against it may not do any good.
That's true. Case in point, had small manufacturing company that we sold had one client. Okay,
Wow.
client concentration issue. Hard to sell those businesses, but
Yeah.
literally had one client. It was all of the machines in this particular shop. They were manual machines. They were not CNC, right?
Hmm.
And the buyer, we told the buyer, it was like, don't rock the boat. You always want to go into a business after closing. You want to go in, just don't make any major changes initially. Just observe, make sure you know the lay of the land before you start changing things around. But every buyer buys a business because they see potential in it. They see that they can improve it, they can make it more profitable, they can do all kinds of things. So this particular buyer already owned a CNC machine shop, and he decided he could take these parts that this other shop was making, and he could just make those parts in his own CNC machine shop. So what he did was, the day after closing, he had a machinery liquidator come in and buy all those manual machines and all the dies and tooling and everything else that went with it, and boom, all of that was now gone.
Yeah.
So guess who couldn't manufacture parts? He gets an order now for these parts. He has no dies, no tooling, and the machines are gone that they used to produce them on.
Wow.
Killed it. He killed the business, one fell swoop.
Wow. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. And
Okay.
to your point about the UCC, so the seller was carrying a note, had filed a UCC. In theory, if there's a lien against the business assets, then you shouldn't be able to just sell them to a machinery liquidator like that,
Right. In theory.
in theory. But it was, what you have to look at then is, for the seller, I think the note was maybe 60 or 80 grand. It would have cost them at least 150,000 to hire an attorney and litigate the matter.
Hmm.
And
It's
then
a
even if
lose-lose
he,
situation.
yeah, and then even if he wins, he loses.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. All right. So we're at our 1 hour mark, and you've been great, but I still have just a couple of questions. Can you stick around just for a few more minutes?
all right, all right.
Okay.
I'll answer what I can.
I'm sure you can do great. Now, of course, we all have to be wary of collusion and the FCC or whoever it is that's FTC, and that we're not collaborating beyond what we should be collaborating, right? But let's talk about commissions a little bit. How do commissions work in business brokerage as opposed to real estate, and how do referrals work?
In general, commissions for business sales are a bit higher than residential and commercial. They're more akin, I think, to land transactions. Um, on the commercial side, business sales are complicated. There's a lot of work involved, a lot of moving parts. And so it requires a little bit different skill set, and the fees are just higher according to that. I can say referral fees, business brokers are allowed to pay referral fees, and we do. Um, unlike residential, so I think in residential, you cannot pay referral fees except to licensed in the state of California, except to other licensed
Yeah, it
professionals,
has to
or
go
real estate licensed
through
professionals.
a broker.
Yeah,
So
it
if you
goes
have
through a
a
broker.
salesperson's license, the commission has to go to the referral fee has to go to your broker, who then
Yeah.
disperses it to you.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to business sales, we can pay referral fees to other business owners. You sell somebody's business, they refer you three other business owners, and you agree to pay them a referral fee. There's no licensing required for that on the business side.
Hmm.
I think, and I don't know about commercial, to be honest with you. You probably know better than I, but I
Yeah,
do know
commercial real
residential on
estate's
the
the
one to
same rules
four.
as residential. Anytime it's a real estate transaction, the referral fee has to go to a licensed real estate broker.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So business, that is not necessarily the case. I thought that was a function of RESPA on the
No,
resi side. Okay.
no, referral fees are governed by real estate law.
Okay. Well, we'll have
Yeah.
to double check that then. But
Yeah.
yeah, but in general, we do, business brokers will pay referral fees. Uh, if it is referred by another licensed person, then it does have to go to their broker.
Hmm.
That's pretty standard. But
Okay. And I was thinking also, if someone is new and interested in learning more, I think one of the best things they could do is go to the California Association of Business Brokers,
yes.
sign up. It's a couple $100 for a year, and then take some of those introductory classes so that you can figure out if what you're learning in those classes, like the business brokerage law class
Mm.
and the introduction to business brokerage and recasting and all those things, take those classes and see if this is really something that you want to do, after you have a good conversation with the business broker.
Yeah, I can tell you that, CAB is focused on, it is California Association of Business Brokers. So the courses that we teach in CAB, because I just finished teaching legal aspects last week. Um, but these courses are California focused. They are
Right.
California law, whereas IBBA, because it's International Business Broker Association, the courses that they have are general business brokerage, because you can't have, because of state laws, you can't, especially legal aspects, they're going to have legal aspects of selling transactions, but it's going to be it's not going to be state specific like CAB courses can be. And
Right.
so, yeah. So California, the great thing about California Association of Business Brokers, we have all the CAB forms that we use for business brokerage, which is helpful.
Yeah. And Tawnya, you've been like the chair of the business forums committee for like what, like 20 years or something? No.
No, no, I am on the forms committee now, but I'm no longer the chair of the forms committee.
Okay.
Um, but I am a former, or past director of forms, and past president of CAB, and I also served on the education committee for a while. I helped to author the legal aspects of business brokerage in California. So it was myself and 4 or 5 other attorneys that I was coordinating all the content for that. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And thank you also for introducing me to the forums committee. And I
Mhm.
was on there for a little bit over a year, I think, almost 2 years. So those committee meetings, they can be interesting, especially when the lawyers that are part of that group get involved and they're debating, the spelling of a word or something.
Yeah, or where a comma goes or shouldn't
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. All right. Tawnya, as always, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. I hope that everyone who's listening has gotten a lot out of this. If you are interested in connecting, fill out the form down below. There's a link so that you can join the RCAoC, the Realtors Commercial Alliance of California, join our mail list. And if you're interested in connecting with Tawnya, get a hold of with me and I can do some pre-vetting. Maybe so Tanya's not deluged with a bunch of questions that I could answer for her, and then we'll connect you when it's appropriate. So thank you very much for joining us today. And remember, coming up a week from now, and if you're listening to this later, once a month, the Realtors Commercial Alliance does have our commercial real estate property pitch Zoom, where commercial brokers can pitch the properties that they have listed and things that they're looking for. And we do have people from across the United States that join that meeting. So even if you're outside of California, feel free to join us. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And Tawnya, as always, it's great talking to you, great having you as a guest. And I really appreciate all the words of wisdom and knowledge bombs that you've been, knowledge nuggets and wisdom bombs. That's what it is that you've been
Thanks,
dropping on
Chris.
us
Thanks for
today.
having me.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.